Hello everyone, and welcome to the August 2017 update of the Power BI desktop. As always, we have a lot of exciting features for you today. So let's get started with the reporting features. As promised, even though last month we GA'd our new table and matrix visuals, we did not stop making updates to them. We actually have 3 different updates to our matrix and table visuals. The first one is one that I know a lot of people have been waiting for, the ability to show your values on the rows instead of the columns. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to start by making a new matrix visual. And in this matrix visual, I'm going to put my sales amount and my units as the values. And I'm going to put on the rows my categories, and on the columns I'm going to put class. So still our default experience is to put each of the values, the fields you have in your values bucket, as column headers. But now in the formatting pane you can go under the values card and pick the option to show on rows. And when you turn this on, you'll notice that we put the headers for the values on the rows now. And so each row is either sales amount or units. This is a very popular feature on pivot tables, and we find a lot of people, especially doing financial reporting, really like being able to put each of their measures on a row instead of a column. So we're very excited to release this new feature for you, and we hope you start using it in your matrices. Our next feature is a new functionality for both the table and matrix. It's another addition to our conditional formatting experience. So we've already had the ability to use color scales on the background color of your cells, and also to add data bars. And this month we're adding the new option to do color scales on your font colors as well. So let me show you that. In this matrix, I'm going to, for my sales amount, go and go to the conditional formatting flyout from the right-click menu. And you'll notice there's now 3 options here: background color scales, font color scales, and data bars. If you pick font color scales, you'll see a dialog very similar to the one we had for your background color scales. You'll be able to set a low value and a high. You'll be able to set the color for the low value and a color for the highest value, or of course be able to specify a specific number you want for your range. And of course you could add diverging in as well if you want to set a middle color. So I'm just going to go with the defaults, red, yellow, and greenish color, and I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see the color automatically being applied to the fonts on all of the sales amounts text on your matrix. Something else that's really nice about this feature, other than just being able to use it, is that we still let you color the background as well. So a nice little benefit of that, you could say, is if you set your background colors to be the same range in colors, you're able to produce a matrix where all you see is the color of the color and not the actual number. So we see a lot of people who are trying to make heat maps don't actually want to see the text. They just want to be able to see the colors really quick and easily. And this lets you do that. So if you have a measure you're just watching out for to see if it turns red or green, you can just set your background and color scale, your font color scales, to the same ranges and colors, and you'll be able to just hide away the numbers. So give this feature a try and let us know what you'll like to see next for your conditional formatting in your tables and matrix. The last matrix-related feature I'm going to talk about today is the ability to customize your subtotal settings per level. So this just adds an additional level of customization on top of what you already have. So I'm going to go, and just to show the power of this feature, I'm going to add another level to my column headers, and I'm going to drill down. And now you can see I have now multiple subtotals. And it used to be I used to have to say, do I want my column subtotals on or off, and I really just had to choose. But now in the subtotals card, I have these new options per row level and per column level. And when I turn this toggle on, I will see a separate toggle show up for each of my visible column headers. So I can choose to say turn just the class total off or leave it on, and same with cell size. This really just adds an additional level of customization to my matrix. I can be really precise about what values I'm showing. And we didn't stop there. We went to an additional feature, which lets you control where your row subtotals appear as well. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to first put my sale size now on the rows instead, so I can show off this feature, and drill down. And you can see that right now my rows subtotals are showing on the top, but I can choose to go into the subtotals card, and just let me drag it closer so you can see the change easier. If I go here, I can see a drop down that lets me change my row subtotal position from top to bottom, and when I do that, my subtotals move. So I'm now able to control exactly where my subtotals show up for my row subtotals. And so between these two different settings, I'm really able to customize how my matrix looks a step further than I could have previously. We didn't focus just on adding new features for our table and matrix. We also updated our line chart. So if you recall, last month we added markers to our line charts, and we've taken that a step further this month, and now we let you control the style of your line too. So instead of just having always a solid line, you can now change the line to be dashed or dotted. In addition to this, because now you have all these styling abilities for your line chart, both markers and line styles, we've now given you additional legend options. So you can decide, do you want to stick to the classic dot legend that we have now, or do you want to customize it so it represents how your line actually looks in your chart? So let me show you those options. So I'm going to move my matrix out of the way and create a line chart. I'm going to put in my line chart my order date, and I'm going to show my units sold on the values, and I'm going to split that up by the 3 classes. And I'll drill down to the month level. And the last thing I'm going to do to set this up is I'm going to go ahead and change this to a categorical axis with my concatenated labels off. So I like this view. And now I'm ready to start customizing it. So by default, you of course have your standard no marker, solid colored lines. But now under shapes, in addition to the marker options that we added last month, I can also change my line style. So I have solid by default, but I can change all of them to dashed or all of them to dotted. But I can also customize my series just like I could for the markers, and also change per line the style. So I can do dashed on one line, and on the other do dotted, and on the third leave it solid. And this feature is really powerful, not just for the stylistic approach, but for a couple of other reasons as well. We found sometimes people will create a measure that shows like a moving goal depending on the month, and they want to style that line differently than their real data, either through a dashed or a dotted line. And so this will let you do that. So if you have a bunch of lines and then one goal line, you can style that differently. Additionally, this is a good accessibility feature as well. So I mentioned this last month if you watched my video for the markers, but you really shouldn't rely solely on color, especially in line charts, to distinguish the different lines from each other. It can make it really hard for someone who is colorblind to figure out what item in the legend applies to which line. By using a combination of markers and line styles, you're able to create a bunch of very distinct lines from each other just by styling them differently, and potentially also turning on the markers with different shapes. This lets you have a true customizable experience. And if you are using this for an accessibility standpoint, it's really good to use those new legend options that I mentioned earlier. Under the Legends card, you now see this style option with a couple of different approaches. The default will show your markers. So if you happen to have just dots or nothing, it shows as the dots, and the color will match the color of the line. But you can control that. So I can say I want the colors to match the color of the markers as well. In my case, that won't make any difference because my markers are styled the exact same. But if I go back to my markers real quick and I say that I want this one square marker to also be purple, I see that reflected in my legend. So even though the line itself is that navy color, because the marker is purple, that's what I see. I can also choose to, instead of using, if say one of my lines did not have markers on it, again because I'm trying to distinguish one line from all the rest because it's special, I can choose to, of course, not put a marker on that line. And if I did that, by default, it will remain a circle because that's what our default legend icon is across the entire product. But if I want that to stand out from, say, the line that was a circle, I can choose to make the default, turn off the circle default icon and make it actually represent the line. So I'll turn that off, and then I'm going to go in my shapes card, and I'm going to, for let's say the deluxe line, I'm going to turn my markers off. And you'll notice, because I had turned that toggle off in this legend, the circle default icon, I turned it off. The line that doesn't have any markers just shows as a short little dash to indicate there was no marker for it. And so this helps distinguish it from the line that had the circle, which was regular. And so we don't provide only customization for how to control the dots. We also have a couple of other options in this style dropdown. So I also had this option to only show the line. So if I don't want to, the markers are purely stylistic, I don't want them to be represented, I can switch over to line only. And you'll notice my line changes to show a actual line with the style applied to it. So the dash line shows as a dash, the dotted, etc. So that's good if the markers are purely stylistic, especially if they're all just dots, and I don't really want to show that in my legend, just the style, I can do that. The last option will be the one that fully represents exactly how your line looks in your chart. This line and markers option, it will, if you have markers, it will show them and they will match exactly color and shape what you see in your chart. And if you have a line style applied, that is also indicated in the legend. So if you want to make sure that your legend 100% maps to what your line chart looks like, this is the option to pick. So combining these options that we released this month, the line styles and the legend options, with the markers that we released last month, you now have vastly more formatting options available for your line chart that you can fully customize to look the way you want and make your line charts and your reports in general much more accessible as well. The next improvement on this list is not a feature per se, but it is something I know a lot of people are going to be excited about. We've made some improvements to how our scatter charts are being rendered, and because of this, you should now see up to a 30% improvement to the load time of your scatter charts. So depending on how many data points you are showing on your scatter chart, the more you're showing, the more of an improvement you should see. So be on the lookout for that. You'll likely see your scatter charts starting to be more performant. The next section of my video is one that I started doing last month, which is a review of the new custom visuals that have been released to the store in about the last month. And the first one I'm going to talk about is one I'm very excited about, which is the dot plot by Mock Software. Mock Software built out this really cool dot plot visual. It shows a lot of information in a fairly small space, and it's very beautiful as well. So let's look at what this specific dot plot is showing us. This dot plot has a couple of different things. Each dot is an individual product from my data set. So you can see that's the axis field well bucket here. So that each dot is an individual product. And on the x-axis, similar to a small multiple, it actually has two categories it's showing. You can choose to only show one, but you can go up to two. You can have on the bottom here, that will be the axis category 1, and we're choosing to show quarters here specifically. And on the axis category 2, the one that's going to show up on the top here, we're showing region. So now you can see you can see an individual dot for each product, each quarter, and each region. And so that makes it really easy to compare across each of your regions what products are selling and what quarter and the differences between each quarter and each region. Of course, the value is revenue, which is showing on the y-axis here, and that's the value bucket on the right. So the higher the dot is on the y-axis, the more revenue that dot has generated. And in fact, near the bottom, that's actually negative revenue for these dots. And the bubble size, which is of course the bubble size bucket, is the gross margin. So the bigger the bubble, similar to our scatter plot, the bigger the bubble, the more gross margin that product has generated. And additionally, you have the legend, which in this case is showing profitable. So if it's light colored, the teal color, it's not profitable, and if it's navy, it is. And so you can see you're showing a lot of information on this chart. You have two measures, the size of the bubble and the axis, and you have multiple categories. The legend category, two categories on the axis, and each dot is an individual category as well. So this visual is a really compact way to quickly compare data points across multiple categories and measures. It's kind of similar visually to a mix between a scatter. You can kind of think of it as like a mix between a scatter and a column chart. It's really powerful, and they put a lot of effort into making this visual not only powerful, but also highly customizable. So in the formatting pane, you'll see, especially compared to a lot of custom visuals, a ton of options. You can control, for example, the grid lines here. You can choose to turn the grid lines off on the axis or not, and same for the category or not. You can change the colors of them to a different grid line, and you can do similar things for tick marks. You can turn axis tick marks on or off and control the colors. And you can also control, for example, the text color for the axis category up on the top here. And I mean, there's just so much here. You can control. You can even change one thing that's really cool is the orientation. You can even change the orientation so that the categories are on the left and the right instead of the top and the bottom. So you can really control a lot of the formatting options in this chart. So I really encourage you to go to our store and download at least the sample and play with a bunch of different configurations and see how you can try to integrate this chart into your reporting as well. The next custom visual I'm going to talk about is the Power KPI visual. So this visual is one that is even used a lot internally in Microsoft, and it's kind of like a combination of our line chart, but making it more suited for showing KPIs instead of really long trend information. So you can see you can already see there's a ton of customization here. It's responsive, so you can take one KPI, and if you make it smaller, we change the layout to make it as clean as possible given the size that you're showing. You can also show things, not only the line, so you can show as many values on this line chart as you want, but you can also show an KPI indicator on this chart that will give you an indication of like everything's going good or bad, and this is highly customizable as well. You can see tons of formatting options here, and so you're able to control all the different KPI indicator labels, and you can also even change what color it shows up as, its position, its shape. So right now it's yellow and triangle, but I can change the triangle from a triangle to say a flag icon, and I'm able to, if it's bad, I can either do a down arrow, or if it's good, an up arrow. I have full customization over what icons are shown and what color are used in each of the different steps. I also have a lot of like the line styling options that a standard line chart has. I can change the style and the thickness, and I can control like, is there a subtitle or not a subtitle. It's purely up to me. You can see there's a lot of different formatting options there for you to control. And this workbook is, if you download the sample workbook, has tons of instructions. It lets you read all about how all the different possibilities with this visual. Has, in addition to instructions, lots of tips and tricks. You can really drill down and learn so much from the visual just by downloading the sample. They even have a couple of different examples of simpler ones versus the one that's on the first page. And so I recommend, even if you're not sure quite how to yet integrate this visual into your reports, I definitely recommend at least downloading the sample and playing with it and reading through all of their suggestions for how to use this chart. The next visual on our list is the funnel plot. And for this one, I'm actually not going to show you a workbook with it. I'm going to show you the Office Store instead, mostly because I want to remind y'all that you can go to the Office Store to really get a lot of information about these visuals. So the funnel plot, it's really all about being able to find true outliers statistically. So you're able to put whatever you're sampling, so in this case all the yellow dots in this example, and you're able to compare your samples and find true outliers based off of the different precision. So you can see there's a bunch of different lines here to help you narrow down which outliers are statistically significant. And this visual is an R visual, so it's very powerful. And what's great about our R visuals, and you can see it says built with R right here, is that R is such a powerful statistical analysis language, but a lot of people don't know R, and they can't use R to create their own visuals in Power BI. That's what's great about the R custom visuals, is that without even knowing the R language, you're able to take advantage of the power. So make sure to go and at least download the sample, click add, download the sample, and give this visual a try. The last visual I'm going to talk about is BeyondSoft Calendar. So this new custom visual is all about representing over time across days in a calendar, how a measure you are trying to measure varies day to day. And so it's kind of like a heat map on a calendar view. So you can see here in this sample workbook, I'm showing 1 month at a time. You always have to show just 1 month, so a good thing to have on the side is a filter to help you change between the different months. And each square of the calendar is colored differently depending on the field that I put in here. And so I'm able to, you can see the value in the measure bucket here. I'm able to color each square by that, and of course there is a tooltip bucket as well if you want to give additional information. And this visual is really good, like I said, for showing information across time, and it can be fully customizable as well in terms of the calendar. So if you want to customize it to match the standard calendar you use in your country, so by default this is standard for how an American calendar would look, but if your calendar changes, like the order of the days or some other layout, you can customize that to meet your needs. And so make sure, if you do have a measure you're tracking on across time, to consider using this calendar heat map visual. Moving on to the analytics section, the first feature we are very excited to announce. It's our what if parameters. Now, if you either went to the Data Insight Summit or watched the keynote on our YouTube channel, you would have seen this in the keynote demo. We now let you have, it's a very highly requested feature, we now let you be able to create parameters. So being able to say, I want this parameter to be between two values, and be able to use that parameter in a slicer. And as you change the slicer, any measure that's using that parameter will get updated. And so you're now able to answer questions like, what would my sales be if I changed the discount I'm giving to customers? Or what would my projected sales be if my revenue was higher this coming month? And you're able to now, using this parameters feature, answer these kind of questions. So let me show you how to set up parameters for what if. You'll find the what if parameter button in the modeling tab. We have a whole what if section here, and when you click new parameter, you'll see a dialog. And from here, you can type in all the information you need for your parameter. So in my example, I'm going to make mine about giving discounts and how my sales were changed based off of the discounts. So I'm going to put discount percentage as the title. And it's a percentage, so I'm going to put decimal, and I'm going to go from 0 to, let's say 35% is my highest I'm willing to go in terms of a discount, and I want my slider to be able to move in increments of, say, 5%. And if I didn't want a default value, I could put that in here. And you'll notice this last option here is a checkbox. If you leave it checked, we will, by default, add a slicer automatically to your report page using this parameter. Of course, if you uncheck it for now, you can always go back in and add your own slicer, but this is just a nice little feature to help you get set up faster. And once I hit OK, you'll notice a couple of things. First, since I had that checked, you can see I have my slider here just automatically added to my report, and I can change its increments from 0 all the way up to 35 in 5 size increments. And we also created this parameter table over here, and it has two things in it. The first is the parameter that is being used in the slicer. So if I ever, say, deleted this slicer, I can just use this first field to add it back, or if I needed it on multiple pages, I could do it there. And then the second thing is a measure that is always equal to whatever the current value of the parameter slider is. So if I add that measure in, for example, you can see it's 0, so it's showing 0 here, but as I increase, the value is equal to whatever the value of my slider is. Now these things are part of your model, so you get all the benefits of things that are normally part of your model. So for example, since this is a percentage, I can go in and I can say I want this to actually be formatted as a percent. And I'm not going to have any decimals for my percentage either. And so now you can see my slider shows a nice 25%. And I can do this for the measure as well if I wanted to. I could set the measure to always be equal to a percent and change the decimals if I wanted to. But since I'm not going to visually show this anyways, I'm not going to bother to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a new measure. And this measure is going to be my sales after my discount. So I'm going to create a new measure, and it's going to be equal to the sum of my sales amount times my discount percentage value. And that will give me, of course, the amount I'm going to discount off. And so then I'm just going to subtract that from my total sales. So the sum of my sales amount, take that and subtract the discount. And now this is my sales amount after discount. And now I have this new measure. What I can do is I'm going to quickly create a column chart just to demonstrate the what if feature. So I'm going to end this column chart. I'm going to add my order date, my sales amount, and my sales amount after the discount, and just scroll down to quarter, or month actually, so it shows less. And you can see right here, I have, since it's a 25% discount, my sales amount would have been this, the teal color, and after the discount, because I gave a discount, I got less money. And as I move this slider, you can see the navy bar updating. So I go down to 5%, and it's just slightly lower than the sales amount before the discount. 0, of course, is equal. And I can go all the way up to 35%, which was my max, and see my bars go down. And of course, what I did here was very simplistic, but since it's just a measure that you can use in any other calculation you want to do, you can get some really powerful reports. And this feature is really good because it's really interactive for the viewers of your report. So if you want, say, your sales team to get a view of what their compensation would be depending on how big of a sale they make, you can give them a slider and they can adjust to see what the differences in their compensation would be. And it lets you be highly interactive and have a nice view of your report and a bunch of different possibilities. And with the release of this feature, we are very shortly going to be announcing a contest in our community around what if and being able to use this in creative ways in your reports. So make sure to watch out for that. You'll see an announcement shortly for that contest as well if you're interested. The next analytic features are 2 related analytics features for scatter charts. You can now add symmetry shading to your scatter chart and also a ratio line between the 2 measures. And these 2 together are actually even more powerful than they are independently. So let's move some of this stuff out of the way so I have room. And I'm going to add a scatter chart. And in my scatter chart, I'm going to put in my average net satisfaction on one axis and my average likelihood to purchase again on another. And then each dot is going to be a brand name, so I'll put that in my details. And you can see this is a nice, decent scatter chart, but it can be especially for some of the dots, kind of hard to tell, does it favor one side or the other? The scales are slightly different between them. This one goes up to 0.8, whereas the purchase again does not. So it can be kind of hard to compare. So that's what the 2 new analytics features we added, which you can find under the analytics pane, are helpful for. The first is symmetry shading, and when you add that, we automatically will shade your scatter chart to show the symmetry line across your report. And you'll notice it is not exactly, corner to corner on my scatter chart. That's because, as I mentioned earlier, the ranges for the axes are different. And because the ranges are different from each other, that is where this benefit comes in. I'm able to say, does an individual measure favor one or the other? So I can say, for example, this dot right here, which is proswear, it might have been hard for me to tell without seeing the shading. Is it favor the purchase again measure or the net satisfaction? But since it relies in the blue, I'm able to immediately make that distinction that it does in fact favor your net satisfaction. Of course, this is customizable, so if you don't like our default colors that we picked, you can go in and change them to any within your theme palette, and you can control the transparency of the shading as well. The second feature is the ratio line. And so, of course, this line is the ratio between the two different measures you're showing in your scatter chart. In this case, purchase again and net satisfaction. And what it lets you do is tell for each of the points how does it compare to the overall ratio between the two. And whenever you combine this ratio line with the symmetry shading, that's where the true power of these two features really starts to come out. Because I'm able to tell, for example, the same pro square that I talked about a second ago, I can see that even though it does favor net satisfaction more than it does purchase again, it doesn't favor it as much as the ratio line is. So this point the Contoso favors net satisfaction more than the overall points when you take them all into consideration. But whereas Pro Square, as I said, does not favor, even though it does favor net satisfaction, does not do it as much as the overall chart favors net satisfaction. So being able to compare these points using both the ratio line and the symmetry line together lets you take your analysis of your scatter chart a step further, and also just makes it a lot clearer. So if you have a point and you're not sure where it lies, when you're comparing the two measures, make sure to turn on your symmetry shading and ratio line, and you'll be able to instantly know where your point is. The last analytics feature I'm going to talk about is yet another new quick measure. This time it's rated average. And so I'm just going to jump right into my demonstration for this. I'm going to remove my matrix I was using earlier, and I'm going to switch over to a slightly different data to demonstrate this. I have this income data, and let me just create a table showing all of this information. In this table, you can see both for each of the different regions of the United Kingdom, you can see the median income, and I'm going to actually switch that over to average. So you can see the average median income in each of those regions, and also the population for it. And you can see, just by looking at this view, it looks like Wales has the highest average median income. But if you go down to the next level down and look at the different counties in those regions, you get a really interesting view. Because you can see, once you start looking at population, that some of these regions actually these counties are fairly low in population. So for example, when you're looking at England specifically, there are several counties that are pretty low in population that are bringing down the really high average median income that this county has. And it has significantly more population. So we need to start taking into consideration not only the median income per county, but also weighting that with the population of that county. And that's where this quick measure comes in. So I'm going to move up back to the different regions level, and I'm going to go for my average median income. I'm going to go and create a new quick measure. And you'll see this weighted average per category option in the aggregates per category section. And by default, it filled in my fields for me, so I'm able to see my median income, and I'm weighing it by the sum of the population. And instead of country, though, I want it to be weighted by I want it to be grouped at the county level. So I'll drop that in there, and I'll hit OK. And you can see it brings you right to the DAX, so you can see what we're doing, and you can make any adjustments you want. I'm going to close that, and you can see in this matrix that I have, has a long title, so I'm just going to immediately jump over to turn on word wrapping to fix that. So I'm going to go over to my row headers, or column headers actually, and I'm going to turn on word wrapping, make this matrix a little smaller. And of course you can choose to rename that so it's shorter, but that's just the auto-generated one. And now you can see, you can start comparing the average median income to the weighted income. So you can see England here, it wasn't the highest in terms of average median income when you just took the average across all the different counties, but once you can take population into account, it is by far the highest. And so this quick measure is really good if you have some kind of value you're measuring, but you need it to be weighted by something. So make sure to give this quick measure a try, and also let us know if you haven't noticed we're making lots of new quick measures all the time, so let us know what other quick measures you want to see and suggest them in our gallery we have at community.powerbi.com. The last section to talk about this month is in data connectivity, and we have two very exciting announcements in this area. The first is that we are now making our Live Connect to the Power BI service feature generally available to everyone. So not only is this feature now generally available so everyone can take advantage of it without turning on the preview switch, we also made 2 updates to the feature as well this month. So let me show you that in action. So I'm going to start by opening a blank Power BI report. And from here, when I go to get data, I'm going to pick, under the online services option, Power BI service. And when I hit connect, I of course can navigate to any of my workspaces that I'm a part of and pick a model that I have access to for editing to connect to. So I'll click load. And you'll notice when it pops up, not only do we have now the status that shows it's connected live to the data set, we additionally have both the name of the data set that it is connected to in the service and also the workspace that it is connected to. So this extra information just helps you as a reminder, what model are you actually working against? The other feature that we added at the same time as we GA'd this feature is the ability to change what model you're pointing to. So if you go under Edit Queries and pick Data Source Settings, if you do that, you're now able to go and pick a different model that you want to connect to. So let's say this one. And doing this lets you be able to do things like work on building your reports against some data set that is a development data set. And then once you're ready to publish your report out to everyone in your organization or part of your organization, you can then move your data set, your report, to point to the production quality data set. And so this is a really powerful feature that we hope that you'll take advantage of. And especially since it allows you to build multiple reports that point to one data set, we hope that you'll use this to help manage all of the many data sources that you want to connect to, especially considering a lot of people have lots of data sets across their team and the company. So give it a try and let us know if you see any other features that we need to add to this data source. So going back to my PowerPoint deck, the very last feature to talk about this month is a beta version of our Google BigQuery connector. So this data source, which you can find under the database section, you'll see in this list, Google BigQuery beta. With this beta connector, you'll be able to either import or, using direct query, pull in data from Google BigQuery databases and build your reports off of them. Since it's in beta, make sure when you try this out to give us any kind of feedback you have so we can continue to improve it and get it ready for a GA release in the future. So that's it this month. Hopefully you can try out some of these new features soon and start giving us feedback so that we can continue to iterate and release really good features for you each month. Thank you.